Everything I've loved in this world, and even the curse that fell on me too.
Hello everybody, Infinite Shinjo here, and welcome back to the channel. Today I am going to rank all of the Kyoto Animation anime that I have watched. I wanted to do another video on Kyoto Animation after they returned with the new season of Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, and I'm sure other projects down the line. And I thought it would be a good idea to rank the anime that I've seen. Now keep in mind, I haven't seen everything from Kyoto Animation. There's definitely going to be a lot of stuff here that I haven't seen that you're expecting. So to put it in perspective, there are 17 anime on this list. And there are probably not even half of them that I'm covering today. And just to make things fair, for a multi-season anime like Hibike Euphonium, K-On!, Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, I'm splitting them up into two separate categories. Because in my mind it doesn't seem fair to rank the whole show if the one season is better than another season. But overall, since there's 17 shows that I'm covering here, let's get into this very quickly. Unfortunately, at the very bottom is Myriad Colors Phantom World. It definitely had an interesting premise and somewhat interesting characters, but what holds it back, in my opinion, are the tropes that it goes with. The usual main character guy sees girl almost naked, and all of the usual tropes that go on with any sort of anime. It just kind of made things feel kind of hollow, in my opinion. It's still got a good opening to this day. Second from the bottom is Amagi Brilliant Park. I definitely liked this a lot more back in the day, but what makes it hard is, even though it's a solid show overall, it's definitely the black sheep compared to other Kyoto Animation stuff. Because this is more kind of serious in a way to put it, and it's not as comical and lighthearted as some other Kyoto Animation stuff is. And it doesn't really have that many serious moments like other stuff on this list. So in short, it's a good show, but unfortunately stacked up to the other Kyoto Animation stuff, it's just not as good. Ranked one above Amagi Brilliant Park is Love Chunibyo and Other Delusions Heartthrob. I want to bring that up that it's only the second season that I'm discussing here. The other season is much better in my opinion, but you'll have to figure out how much I feel about that later. So what is it about this season that I don't like compared to the other season? Well, it's basically introducing Rika 2.0. You got another character that's just delusional about everything. The only thing is now, it's a love triangle. Who would have thought? And with love triangles comes the usual tropes that any anime comes with. And like I mentioned before on this channel, Nibutani is just annoying in this season. She gets to the point where her whole personality is, I have to get Rika and the other dude together. And it just gets annoying in my opinion. Kyoto Animation, or any studio for that matter, definitely know how to do romance better than this. But they have to bring in another character to rival Rika. And it just doesn't work in my opinion. After the first season being so much better than this, it's just kind of upsetting that it had to downgrade to this. So just as a fair warning, from here onward, I have more positive to say about these shows rather than negative. But like I already mentioned, it was hard to figure out how I'm going to rank these shows because they're all solid up to this point. So unfortunately, the next one that had to take the fall is Lucky Star. Lucky Star is a really good show. I want to bring that up. But unfortunately, compared to everything else that hasn't been covered, it's just not as good. It definitely makes more sense watching it back in the day because of the jokes that the main girl is the same voice as Haruhi Suzumiya, and they make references to that and jokes about that. But if you didn't watch it back in the day, there's probably a lot of references that you didn't even get. So stuff like that doesn't really work. But overall, Lucky Star is just kind of chill, which isn't good, but it doesn't make you feel any emotion. And for other Kyoto Animation stuff, they definitely make you feel emotion. So unfortunately, that's what kept Lucky Star from getting further than 14th. So at lucky number 13 is Hibike Euphonium Season 1. And while I'm at it, number 12 is Hibike Euphonium Season 2. I decided to put these two back to back because they're just so similar. Obviously, it's the same show, but overall, it's more of the same thing with both of the seasons. The only reason that I put Season 2 above Season 1 is in Season 1, we're still getting used to the characters in the show, and by Season 2, you become more accustomed to the characters. That big payoffs that happen feel more earned because you're attached to these characters a lot more than you would be in Season 1. But overall, these shows were just solid in my opinion, but it didn't really grab me as much as other shows on this list. At number 11 is 2006's Canon. So I don't remember this. I think there must have been another Canon before this, but then Kyoto Animation took it and redid it. And unfortunately, when I watched through this, it just gave me vibes of it's trying to be Clannad. Because I just recently finished Clannad at that point, and then going into this, you can definitely see the similarities. There are a bunch of girls on the cover, just like in Clannad, and you have one guy that's trying to solve all of these problems. Whether or not it is a ripoff or not, that's not what I'm here to discuss, because I don't know the exact years from both projects, but that's just what it made me feel. Although honestly, looking back, I might remember it more fondly, but being one of the shows that I watched and it just made me feel like it's trying to be Clannad didn't really sit well with me. And to be quite honest, I don't remember much from the show. Not anything that would have been done in Clannad. But now here's where things get interesting, because now we're at the top 10. And just breaking into the top 10 is K-On! Season 1. I mentioned before that the seasons are split up, so this is only covering Season 1. I don't like Season 1 as much as Season 2, obviously, like I mentioned with the Euphonium spot. But the Season 1 is still very solid. It gives you an introduction to the four main girls, and it lets you learn more about them and their dynamics. The one criticism that I have with Season 1 is that there are just times that Rika and Yui are just a bunch of idiots, and it makes Mio seem like the bad guy, or bad girl in this case, trying to get them to practice. It just never really sit well with me that Mio felt like the bad person in the situation, where she's trying to actually have them practice and learn their music. But overall, still a very solid show, but that was my only criticism with it. At number 9, we have Clannad. Just Clannad Season 1. It's a really good show, although looking back on it, it definitely, I don't want to say ages poorly, because that's not what I'm implying at all. But what I'm trying to say is for Season 1, it's just that we learn about this one girl, we learn about their backstory, and we got a big payoff, and then we move to the next girl. It's just one of those things where it just feels like it's a bunch of separate stories just cut up and split into a show. It doesn't really feel like a group, if that makes sense. It just feels like they're just literally taking it from the light novel. It just feels kind of odd because we learn about Ibuki, the star girl, and we learn about her, we get the payoff, but then she doesn't really come up outside of that other than a few random gags. It just feels like it's so disjointed in my opinion. But it's more set up in my opinion, and that's what's keeping it at 9. At number 8, we have Hyoka. Now this is one I actually forgot about until I was looking over this list. Hyoka's a very solid show. Although at the same time, it's not really anything super spectacular compared to other stuff. It just looks really good when it comes to the points where you get real big animation with it. But overall, it's just a bunch of kids hanging out solving mysteries. So it's a more chilled version of Scooby-Doo. I like the show, don't get me wrong, I just wish that it had a bigger payoff. Number 7 is Love, Chinibyo, and Other Delusions. Season 1. I have to mention, this is only Season 1. Season 1 is very good. At the same time, Nibutani is still my least favorite character in the show by a landslide, but at least in Season 1 she's more antagonistic, so it makes things more enjoyable. In Season 2, she just turns into Cupid. But Season 1 is a lot more fantastical, if that makes sense, because you get introduced to characters like Rika and then all the other girls that come in later on down the line. It just makes things feel a lot more interesting, in my opinion. And I honestly wouldn't have been upset if they would have left it at only one season. At number 6, we have Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid Season 1. Of course, this is one of the earlier anime that I watched, so it makes sense that it will be here. But overall, it's just a good introduction. That's what the best thing that I can say for these multi-season animes. It's just a good introduction to the characters. And you learn more about characters like Toru and Kana. Lucilla and Elma don't really get as much backstory compared, but it's just really cool. And for the first show that came back after the arson attack in KyoAni Studios, the Season 2 was really good, but I'll get into that when I get into that spot. Season 1 is just a good show. The problem that I have is it's more slice of lifey. It doesn't really do much outside of that, which isn't necessarily bad if you just want something to relax to, but there isn't really a big story happening. And it still bugs me that Toru and Kana went to go see Kobayashi's parents, but we never get a payoff to that. Rocking into the number 5 spot is K-On! Season 2. So, I wasn't entirely sure where I put K-On! I knew that I wanted to put Season 2 above Season 1, but I feel like introducing a character like Azusa does good for the cast, because where we have the 4 main girls that have become accustomed to each other and learn how to deal with each other's shortcomings, bringing in a character like Azusa really makes sense, because she really tries to be like Mio, but she learns more and more to be more laid back compared to the other girls, especially Yui, and that's just really good. And the payoff at the end of the show is really good as well. Overall, it's more of the same, the girls just doing their own thing, but bringing in another character like Azusa that does great things for the dynamic of the group is what lands it at number 5. Somehow making their way into the 4th spot is Nichijou. I knew Nichijou was going to be high up, but to be quite honest, I didn't expect it to be this far up. In all honesty, I think Nichijou is Kyoto Animation's best comedy, in my opinion. It's just joke after joke after joke. And when you compare it to other shows that Kyoto Animation has done that's been a lot more heartfelt, a lot more emotional, a show like this is definitely something that's out of the ordinary. And in a show like this, where it doesn't seem like there are any rules, it actually tries to keep itself grounded and does a very good job at it. There are rules to this universe, but they don't typically make sense. There are a lot of good scenes that I can remember from this, and I really need to rewatch this dub, because from what I've seen, it's really, really good. There are just so many good characters and good moments in this. Again, favorite comedy by KyoAni, might be one of my favorite comedies overall. Flying their way into the 3rd spot is Miss Kobayashi Dragon Maid Season 2. This is a bit more recency bias for sure, because it's the most recent thing that KyoAni has produced. But also, like I mentioned before, this is, to my knowledge, the most recent thing that they posted after their arson attack that happened. And bringing back something like Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid is definitely a good call, because it's definitely beloved by a lot of people. And for a show like this, where it delved more into the backstory of Toru and even Elma, it's just really good. and the backstory that we learned in the later part of the season is really good as well. In my opinion, much better than the first season, but even introducing other characters that I didn't even bring up yet, it's just a really good, solid show overall. But unfortunately, it's not my favorite sequel that KyoAni has done. That would be number 2 with Clannad After Story. I knew Clannad was going to be one of my favorites. It's just a really good show. Like I mentioned with other spots, the payoff is great, where you learn more about these characters. They even get a cameo in the middle part of the show. The whole thing with Nagisa giving birth is just amazing, and that does sound weird out of context, but you have to trust me. It's just a very good show. There are times that I'm sure it could be more of a forced emotional moment, but it's just a really good show overall, a really good franchise overall. If it was my choice, it would probably still be this high up if I included Season 1, but in my opinion, Season 2 is definitely better than Season 1. I just feel like Season 1 does kind of help it, but hold it back at the same time, because Season 1 does build up these moments. The slice of life sort of thing does kind of hold it back a bit, but again, very solid show, very great ending, but there can be only one that's the winner of KyoAni produced anime, and that would be Violet Evergarden. There was no way it wasn't going to be a struggle between Violet Evergarden and Clannad After Story. I knew those were going to be the top 2. I just wasn't sure how it was going to play out. But Violet Evergarden is just a beautiful franchise. I mentioned before about the art with KyoAni. This is my absolute favorite. Every single picture looks like a masterpiece. You could put it in a museum and people would just be amazed by it. It's just a really good franchise. I haven't seen the movies yet. I really need to get into watching the movies when I have time. But from the one season that I have seen, it's a really good franchise. Violet is such a fun character. Fun being the loosest term I can describe it with, I guess. But there are just so many emotional moments, so many memorable characters. It's just a really good franchise overall. But those are Kyoto Animation anime ranked. Now, of course, like I said at the start of the video, there are some that I haven't watched, like the obvious Haruhi Suzumiya. I haven't seen any of that franchise, so I only ranked stuff that I've seen because it makes no sense to rank stuff that I haven't finished. But let me know your ranking down in the comment section. If you enjoy, hit that like button down below. If you want to see more videos where I rank stuff like this, let me know that as well. And I'll see you next time. Momentai.